Welcome back to Mitiga Minutes. Today we're talking about Mitiga's threat detection and investigation workbench features. Now let's take a look at the threat feed view. We've got 17 events that are showing up. Each one gets its own row. These are things that Mitiga has identified as interesting. And if we look at severity, we've got a couple critical, 9 high, and 6 medium. Now we see the platforms that are related to these 17 events: AWS, Azure AD, Microsoft 365, and others. And again, these are only platforms that are associated with these 17 events. There could be many others connected. Now we map these events to the MITRE ATT&CK Cloud Matrix to make it easy for you to determine what areas are being impacted as they relate to MITRE. Now before we dive into the events, I want to show you a few more features, like show me events that are open, in progress, resolved. I can change my time frame, what's my start and stop date. And I can also add some secondary filters to this. So for example, filter by specific platforms, maybe just Okta, maybe just GitHub. Show me only the severities, maybe critical and high, for example. Perhaps indicators of attack. This is really nice if you're looking for very, very specific attack types. And as you can see, there's quite a few within these 17 events. And then map it to specific areas within MITRE ATT&CK. And we'll touch on these a little bit more later. And there's a couple other filters you can add to this. It's very extensible, but it's designed to help you navigate your way through all this data. Now I want to show you a couple other little features here, like suppression rules. This is a way to get rid of some noise for events that don't really add value to an investigation. They're just not going to do anything except take up space. Now the last thing I want to show you before we jump into the actual events are integrations. Now this is where you can add integrations with ticketing systems, CMDBs, SIEMs, SOARs, and many other solutions. As you can see, there's a ton here. But let's go ahead and pick Splunk. Maybe we want to connect with Splunk. So the first thing I want to do is give it an integration name, and it just says list that here. Then my event collector token. Of course, I need that. I need the URL, of course. And then I need the index name. And if for any of these areas you need a little bit more information, we've got links directly to the vendor's site that outlines how to do this. In this case, how do we handle indexes through Cisco's Splunk? And we have all the relevant details, so you don't have to go hunt around for that information in some other location. Now to make these 17 events a little bit easier to manage, I'm going to filter by critical and high, and then I'm going to sort by severity. So I've got the critical events up on top. Now I see 11 different events that I'd like to investigate. And I see the platforms for this one happen to be Okta with audit logs, AWS with CloudTrail, and LastPass with audit logs. So I'm seeing multiple sources from this one event, and I'm seeing how that maps to MITRE, which again can be very useful depending on what you're researching. I can also look to see what's the status of this specific event. Is it legitimate, risky, is it malicious? This essentially allows me to track and triage events, especially if I'm working with multiple analysts. So let's take a look at this first event, Okta successful MFA fatigue. Okay, what's this all about? So we see a specific user, their email. We see the time and date of this event. That's very useful. And then we see some other relevant data in here. But I'm just going to jump right over to AI Insights. This is where Mitiga's artificial intelligence has been trained to operate like an analyst. For example, here's a source IP address that's been flagged as malicious by multiple threat intelligence vendors, newly seen user agents, new action performed, and newly seen device name. Now, any one of these by itself might not be that important, but taken collectively with all the other supporting data, it becomes so. Now, if I wanted to respond, this is really neat. For example, if I'd like to go ahead and reset the password with Okta, this is how I do it with the console, and I can run that. Or just give me the command line. And I can actually copy and paste that curl command directly into my system and run that, which is really, really cool. So a massive time saver. And for those of you who like to look at the raw logs, all those records are here as well. So for example, this is a MFA fatigue attack, and we see there's multiple failures, high attempt count. And we can look at all the log records that are related to these particular instances. We can see there's 4 in this case. Now we talked about collaboration a little bit through integrations like through SIEM and SOAR and ticketing, but maybe I just want to share this page. Maybe I want to get this link, I want to email it to somebody or Slack it over to them so they can put it into their browser and just bring up this specific view. As long as they've got access to the system, it's no problem. They click on it and boom, they go to that exact event that you were researching. It really makes things simple. Now, if I want to suppress this, I could do it on the fly. I'm not going to suppress this though. This is something important, but I do want to investigate it. So now we've pivoted into the Investigation Workbench view. Now here it actually just automatically pulled up the user. And we can bring up different fields that equals or contains, but this is brought over from when we were in the threat detection view. I can change the start and end date, different platforms again, and I have very similar filtering capability that we saw with the threat detection view. But I want to do one thing quick here. I'm just going to go to the very top and say, hey, order this from the first event on top to the last event on the bottom. There's only 2 events here, so the first one, then the second. So there's that MFA fatigue that we saw before that we were researching. And then here's anomalous access to the Snowflake database. So if I look at that MFA fatigue, I see in my workbench that there's this anomaly, some credential access, some user and IP address information, and then I see there's some potential exfiltration from the Snowflake database as well. So I can pull up the database details, even getting down to a table level within this investigation. So really powerful. Now let's look at one last incident. I'm going to use MITRE ATT&CK to map into persistence. And I just want to look at the 3 events that have to do with persistence according to MITRE. Now, I'm going to take this one at the very top. User changed password from a new country. That happened to be Mexico. And we see the user as email, we see the time, and we see that Okta password has changed from this country. The details about that user, I can click on the indicator of attack as well. And it said, hey, this detects when a user changes their password in Okta from a location that is abnormal. Investigate it. Now in this case, I want to hunt down some information about this user. And why is it so important that they changed their password from Mexico, right? What is it that stands out about that within the system that would pull that together? Well, I can look at user information or IP information. First, I'm going to bring up this user profile. And I can see the top countries that they usually visit. Japan, Singapore, the United States. You know what's not in there? Mexico. Because we keep all of that information to create that profile. So we do behavioral analytics, looking at what users do. We do that across AWS, GCP, Azure Active Directory, and we create this model for how human and non-human entities behave. And when something is nominalistic, then we take a little bit of a deeper look. Now that deeper look reveals that not only did they log in from Mexico, but 5 objects were downloaded. Okay, what was downloaded? Well, it looks like bank details, transactions information. Okay, that might be kind of important. So now let's look at the IP address for this specific user. What's been tied to this entity? In this case, it pulls it directly up. This is IP 1.2.3.4. And we see all manner of badness here now that we know this is a malicious source. So snapshots have been taken. Bucket policy of bucket client data EU region was modified. Uncommon platform actions. Well, this just sounds like a bad day. So now we've gone about 1 inch deep into Mitiga's threat detection and investigation workbench to show you how awesomely powerful it is at bringing in all those different platforms, all those different log formats, and making sense of it so you can take action and get results. For more information about Mitiga, visit mitiga.io and request a demo.